Hey everyone, Reaper here again with yet another video. This time it's a discussion video, so we're not going to see any books showed off or anything like that. But from the title, you can guess what this is going to be about. It's about tape on comics. Now, this is something, the reason why I want to talk about this, I'm pretty sure this has been talked about to death in the community and on certain boards and all that stuff. But I wanted to talk a little bit about it from my point of view and all that. Like I said, my point of view may mean absolutely nothing to you and all that stuff. But it's just something that I wanted to talk about because it's something that I've been thinking about over the last few months. I've always thought about tape, but never the way I've been thinking about it over the last few months. So, tape on comic books. I think universally, I think a lot of us can say that probably don't like tape on comic books for a number of different reasons. I'm not going to get into all those reasons. Everyone's different. But for me, I think I don't like having tape on comics, even though I do have some books with tape. All right, both raw and slabbed. I prefer not to. I prefer, it's not my first option when it comes to buying a book. Tape, oh, I don't care. It's like, well, let's see if I can get something else. But I don't like tape because it eventually damages the paper. It discolors the paper and it makes it look, not pretty. It makes it look quite ugly, depending on the level of staining damage that comes from the tape. All right, so I think we could all agree that we prefer not to have tape on our books. Yet there are some books that I have in my collection, and maybe even some books you have in your collection that have tape where it may not be that big of a deal. All right. So, what else is there to be said about tape on books? I think a lot, and this is something that I often thought about, but I know the answers are out there, and I think we know the answers, is tape restoration. CGC, according to CGC, and I think CBCS, I don't know, I do have some CBCS books that have tape on them. The answer is no. However, I think there are some situations where tape might be considered restoration, and this comes from CGC. This is an answer I got from CGC, that 9 times out of 10 it'll be no. But there are some times where it will be considered restoration. When I followed up with asking, well, what are those situations that make tape restoration, classify tape as restoration, I didn't get an answer. I don't necessarily have the answers for that one. I can only theorize. I could be dead wrong on this, but I think when tape might be considered restoration is when there might be a piece out. Like, for instance, the top corner of your comic or bottom corner or whatever has been ripped, and you take a piece of tape and you reattach it. That might be considered restoration, but don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. I'm not saying that this is, no, that's definitely it. That may not be it. But that's what I think. I think that's when, that 1 time out of 10, according to CGC, it might be considered restoration because you're adding the piece back on to make it look better. And some people might say, well, tape, when you tape up a tear or you do something like that to the book, that's trying to make it look better too. Isn't that restoration? I guess, some people might say yes, I don't think so, though. I think the whole purpose of restoration I think restoration, first and foremost, is supposed to be invisible. Now, we know that it's not always invisible. With the trained eye or even just eyes in general, you can see restoration on some books, whether it's obviously glue or it's color touches or trimming. Sometimes people can see these things quite clearly. I do believe that the whole purpose of restoration is obviously to make the book look better, but I think the way you do it is supposed to be invisible, and that's why restoration is looked down on and all these other things, among many reasons and all that stuff. People trying to sell restored books for top dollar, and all the problems that have come over that in the years. And since slabbing, that's been cut down drastically. Although the slabbing companies are not flawless. Sometimes they miss restoration. Sometimes Heritage misses restoration. I would even say sometimes my comic shop, which is very good, misses restoration. So anytime you have a person or people doing this, looking out for things, it's liable for error every now and then. All right, so no one's perfect, nothing's perfect. But like I said, I do believe, though, the initial restoration is supposed to be invisible. Well, tape, when you put tape on a book, it's not invisible, is it? You can still see it. So I don't think anybody could argue that tape makes the book look better. I mean, maybe you can argue it, I don't know. People could argue anything. But I don't think that putting tape on a book necessarily makes it look better. If you have this tear that goes, halfway down the cover and you put tape on it and say, oh, well, voila, it looks much better now. Probably not. It's probably best just to leave it as is. So, I could understand why some people, the grading companies, they've grandfathered that in tape, not being not considered restoration. Some of the things that they say is that kids have been putting tape on their books for decades before collecting comics became something to do for money. I guess that would be decades before the 60s, late 60s, and all that stuff. They just put tape on the books to make sure that the cover didn't fall off, or they didn't lose that piece that was dangling from the cover or the page or whatever. So they put tape on it to make sure it stayed there and it stood there, and all that. They didn't do it for monetary reasons. That now it's now it's fixed. I'm going to sell this for more money. So I think that's why, among many reasons why they don't, it's most of the time not considered restoration. If you don't like tape on your books, you don't buy it. I know there's, like I said earlier, there's some people that consider tape restoration. Anything you do to a book would be considered restoration. There's an argument for that. But I will say this, though, about it. As I was doing my research, I've talked to a bunch of people. And as I was doing a little reading here and there about it, I remember I came across a post, and I think this was on the CGC boards, where somebody said, no, they don't consider tape restoration, but I think down the line, CGC will consider it restoration. I doubt that. I doubt that very much for this reason. As I said, people have been getting their books slabbed for almost 20 years now. And according to CGC, like that email that I spoke with the person, 9 times out of 10, tape will not be considered restoration. So there are so many 4.0 Amazing Fantasy 15s out there that probably have a little piece of tape on the spine because it had a little bit of a spine split. Or some of the defects that I mentioned have a little piece of tape. And so many other books. Better books than Amazing Fantasy 15, maybe Superman 1s and Batman 1s that are 3.5s, 4.0s that have a little bit of tape on the inside of the cover or on the outside of the cover, keeping it somewhat structurally sound. There's been 2 decades of that type of grading. I don't think CGC is all of a sudden going to say, yeah, tape is restoration completely now. I think there would be a bit of a fallout if they did that, just for somebody that said, hey, I just got my Amazing Fantasy 4.5 or 4.0 slab 2 years ago, graded, and now you're Blue Label, now you're telling me that all tape is restoration? What is it? That means my book is not worth as much? I think that would cause a lot of problems like that down the line. I don't think that that's going to happen, but then again, what do I know? But that's just a little discussion I wanted on tape. I mean, do you have books that have tape on your covers or inside your book? If you do, does it matter to you? Or does it matter to you and you just got it anyway because it was a hard book to find? I'd be interested in hearing some of your thoughts on it. Leave them in the comments. Take care, everyone, and be safe.